Welcome to Next to Madison, a podcast to help you live your best life.
Hey, welcome back to another fun and exciting episode of Next to Madison. This is episode 169. On today's episode, we are sitting down with an amazing coach, author, speaker. She has a new book out called Dare to Lead Like a Girl. She is taking her experience as a C-suite executive at major firms and has brought those in to teach people how to create a better environment and how to be a better leader. And we're going to talk all things business, leadership, how you can be happier at work, all the good stuff. So that's very exciting. But before we get into that, I just want to remind you, please rate, review, subscribe. It helps us for people to discover, more easily discover the show if they aren't already an active listener like yourselves, which I am appreciative to each and every one of you who continue to listen to this podcast, share this podcast, and be inspired. Again, this is a podcast that aims to make you happier, healthier, and wealthier. We also have some fun, exciting news. We're going to start doing some giveaways, which is pretty exciting. Everybody likes free stuff. We'll be giving away tickets. We'll be giving away money. All these fun things. It's a new way to kind of give back to our audience base, but in order to be able to participate in that giveaway, you'll need to be on our mailing list. So you can go to nexttomadison.com, and if you scroll down, you will see where you can sign up for our email list or our newsletter. And if you just put your email in there, you will automatically be added to the list. You will get a reminder about new episodes that are out and also information about the upcoming giveaways. So you won't want to miss that. Very exciting stuff that we have going on. We've got some other fun announcements. I have a fun announcement I'm going to be making in the next episode, so please make sure to tune in for that. And with that being said, we will be back after this brief message from our sponsor with our amazing guest on this episode of Next to Madison.
This episode is brought to you by Balance 7. Balance 7 is a concentrated alkaline with a pH of 11+. I didn't realize that acidosis is responsible for almost every infectious disease in our world today. With COVID-19 and the world opening back up, I started taking Balance 7, and after 3 days of taking it, I feel better, I have more energy, my focus is better, I think clearer. This supplement is amazing. Thanks, Dr. Noristani, for the recommendation. And all Next to Madison listeners are able to try it today by visiting balance7.com and enter code word Madison for a complimentary gift and free shipping.
Okay, we are back with our amazing guest on this episode of Next to Madison. With us today is Dalia Feldheim. I am so excited to have her here. She's, as I said in the intro, she's an amazing speaker, author, coach. She's a leader. She's amazing. And she's going to tell us about her new book, Dare to Lead Like a Girl. So first of all, I want to start with, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here, Madison.
Yes, I'm happy to have you. So tell us about the inspiration for writing this book.
Well, that's probably, we all get inspired by our toughest moments. But I spent 17 years at Procter & Gamble as a marketing executive. I call them the years of flow. Those were the amazing years, right? And I was just in a state of flow, which is sometimes called meditation in action, completely aligned to my purpose. Did amazing work around the world. And I'll tell you one story. I'll tell you actually the one story that basically was the key driver of writing this book. 6 months into my role in Procter & Gamble, I was called into my manager's office, okay? And I'm sitting in his office and, basically one of my launches hit a wall and we were trying to understand what was going on. And I was getting so frustrated because it was basically my product was stuck at customs. And when I get frustrated, I tear. So I'm sitting in his office and a tear rolls down my cheek. Now my boss, Jim, who's a friend and, mentor until today, he hands me a box of tissues. And, I frantically try to regain my composure. Okay. How embarrassing. I'm crying in the office of my general manager. Okay. My manager. When I finally regain my composure, Jim looks me dead in the eye and he says to me, Dalia, don't you ever be embarrassed for crying in the office again. It's a sign of your passion. And passion, Dalia, is your superpower.
Wow.
Wow, right? I was so empowered. And then he said to me, and if you ever work for someone that doesn't appreciate that, Dalia, walk away. They don't deserve you. So, Madison, for the next 17 years, I had many managers like Jim. And, sometimes I say they believed in me more than I even believed in myself. And my career just really went from good to great. But it wasn't really until I reached the lowest point. And that's interesting because that what drove me to write the book. So 17 years later, we moved from Geneva, Moscow to Singapore, and P&G wanted me back in Geneva. My husband opened a high-tech company. It wasn't right for us. I decided to put my money where my mouth is on dual career. P&G and I parted as friends, and I took a role that seemed like a dream role, okay? It was CMO for another Fortune 500 company. I was responsible for over 100 people in Asia. Really, marketeer's role. Loved the CEO, loved the CMO. Everything seemed perfect. 1 month into the role, I get a new boss, the local CEO for Asia. And it took me a week to figure out that him and I were like water and fire. Okay. So I was the energy and passion and people, and he was all about scorecards and numbers and, ROI, return on investment.
Yeah.
Days, the culture felt like ROI or you die. So that was kind of the feeling there. And in one of my first meetings, he calls me and he says, Dalia, I'm not going to tell you what you're good at. I find it a total waste of time. I'm only going to focus on what you need to fix. And then he kind of jokingly says, oh, and there's no art in marketing, my dear. It's only science. You just didn't get it yet. You get the story, right? It was like a match made in heaven. But the moment that really drove me to write this book was one day I was kind of summoned in his office and he started giving me feedback. And Madison, I personally love feedback, right? But this was just, we used to call it tough love in P&G. Okay. Feedback that is coming from, that is direct and no sugarcoating, but comes from a position of love, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
No love. It was only really tough, humiliating, denigrating, personalized, the whole shebang. And I'm sitting there. Now I'm a C-suite woman, one of the only women on his team. So I'm holding it in. But then he starts insulting my team. And that's where I became a lioness, right? Because I knew how unfair it was. And I was getting so angry and so frustrated that a tear appeared in my eye.
Yeah.
Now he smiled at me and he offered me a box of tissues. And, I started having this warm, fuzzy feeling, remembering my first boss, Jim, right? But then I kind of looked up and I saw something weird in his smile as he turned around the tissue box. And I couldn't believe my eyes. On the other side of that tissue box, he prepared in advance a handmade sticker that read Dalia's tissue box. Yes. That was my reaction. I was like, are you kidding me? This is an HR assault. And he's like, oh, Dalia, stop being so emotional. It's just boy banter. I know you have a sense of humor. Well, anyway, I stayed there for 3 years because I wasn't raised to give up, right? And I kept on saying, why should I quit? I loved my job. I loved my team. So I persevered there for 3 years. And when I left, I was like, oh my God, what a waste of human potential. In one company, I was this top rated, kick-ass, and I gave 200% every day. And in the other, they thought I delivered, but I know I gave them 10% of my ability because I was so busy dealing with all this office politics and all this basically bullying. And so that's, I guess, the trigger to this book. And, it's really about, when I went and I took a break and I decided to go study because I really wanted to understand, was there anything else I needed to do?
Yeah.
Research, right? And sadly, I discovered that what happened to me was way too prevalent in the business world today.
Yeah.
What percent of employees feel bullied at work? Any guess?
80.
Okay. So yes, you're close. 50. Okay. So 1 in 2 either experience it directly or indirectly, but you're close that 85 are unhappy in the workplace today.
Yeah,
85 unhappy employees, 20% of them are toxic. So
I
I'm like,
believe
oh,
that.
we're in the midst of a huge crisis, a huge mental health crisis. And I think I know what we can do to help that. It's basically comparing these two companies, what I learned about, how I, felt differently when I was in a company that nourished me versus a company or a boss that didn't. And it's
Yeah.
all about, connecting to those more feminine leadership traits. And, so that's kind of was the inspiration, and I can tell you more about kind of what I learned, but that was a driver.
Yeah, no, and I could see that. But it is true. There are so many people that are unhappy, which is, a big drive for starting your own business. It's also a big drive for, people then putting everything on social media and starting new other ways to make money, which is social media is such a positive and a negative. It's a positive because it's created so much exposure and opportunities for those who want to use it, but obviously the negative is the bullying never stops with the kids, and you kind of
Yeah.
really put yourself out there, and you really got to be kind of prepared for it. It's like you're stepping into fame unknowingly without being mentally prepared for it. But I'm an entrepreneur. That's what I consider myself. I don't like working for people. I like working with people. I think that's a big
Yeah.
difference. I know that when I did a lot of, I was building my career when I was doing stand up all the time. And I would do a lot of like temp jobs. So I could then go out for auditions or go on the road for comedy or write scripts. And, I was in a lot of very, very different types of environments and cultures, and some were more toxic than others. But it was amazing looking back. It really came down to like who was in charge of who
Mm.
was kind of creating that environment. And there's a blessing in disguise, I think, with companies when they go public. Blessing is people get rich, people like you and I can go invest and also profit from the growth of the company. But I think the other thing too is they just worry about their bottom line. And that's all
Mm.
that matters. And everything kind of goes to the wayside. We have to make the investors happy and do what's best for the investors instead of doing what's best for the people that are actually making the company successful. So I think it's like a give and take. It's kind of like you want to keep the company private as long as you can, because as soon as you get these assholes in there, forget
I,
about it. It's awful.
I yeah, I'm not sure if it's the private versus, because when you go public there's also scrutiny across the board, but there is this dilemma that CEOs have between short term and long term, because it is, bullies get the job done short term, okay, through fear and other dimensions. But the issue is that long term, it's not working. I mean, half the team left. I mean, there's so much, the cost of hiring a bully or keeping a bully is so much higher, when you look at a 3 years, with the impact, because we see the cost on someone that has been in this scenario. It's mental health, and it stays. There's this post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
Okay. There's even a phenomena called phantom bullying. So even when that CEO has been, or that leader has been removed, there's a level of toxicity, like types of behavior that everyone mirrors a leader. So there's this toxicity in the team that stays even after he left, or he or she left, right? So, there's a whole assessment of cost of bullying, being 10 times higher than the investment in proper, management. And, companies now, I do a lot of consultation for CEOs, and they ask me, okay, so what's the strategy? We know, the cost. I think the first thing is really naming the behavior. I think for me,
Yeah.
only after 3 years, when I attended P&G alumni, so my previous company, and I walked into there and I plunked myself in the seat, and I'm like, oh my God, I've been a frog in boiling water. Now, people say, I'm not a pushover, and I've been head of the women's network. I fired 4 men on misconduct of other people. So how
Yeah.
come when it came to you, right? And I would say, and that's the reality. And I interviewed a lot of people for my thesis on this, and there's a whole sense of, at least with me, there was a sense that, oh, I can manage app. I'm really good at managing app. I even had a senior person who placed me in the role tell me, oh, he has an issue with people, but you're the only one who can fix him, right? So I had this crazy sense of mission, but I very quickly learned you can't change someone that doesn't want to change.
Yeah.
Okay, number
100%.
one. And there's really is only one strategy for dealing with toxic environment. I mean, yes, you can increase resilience, and my book is all about building resilience. And I tell about the tools that I learned both from research, but also for myself, whether it's focusing on my purpose and my people and creating an amazing. I mean, I wouldn't stay there. I enjoyed a lot of elements. I focused on the elements that I enjoyed. But yes, you can build resilience. But if you're in a really toxic environment, the more resilient you become, the more the toxicity and the bullying sometimes increases. And when it
Yeah.
comes to really toxic environment, the only strategy that works is zero tolerance. And I guess for me, that was a big thing because I tried to deal with it with empathy and humor, right? Hey, I can handle this, etc. And suddenly I found myself that I became numb, right, to behavior that I shouldn't have become numb to. So when I say zero tolerance, it's really early on saying, sorry, but this is not acceptable. I'm going to leave, and I'm ready to have a discussion when you're ready to be more respectful. Something across those
Yeah.
lines, quick, it needs to be immediate, right? And it's not boy banter, and there's no sense of humor when it comes to bullying. So I think that's kind of the one thing. But to answer your other point, I would just say that there's, one very simple strategy. I mean, the company needs to take on a zero tolerance. That's number one. But the second thing, if we want to create, zero assholes in the company, a very simple, strategy is don't promote assholes. And, in P&G, there was a very simple kind of strategy where you would get a rating on, your performance for building the business. Okay. So how much you met your KPIs and, the ROI of your work, but you also got a rating for building the organization. How good are you as a coach? And this was only assessed by your people. The only people that can
Yeah.
assess a leader is his people, right? His or her
Right.
people. So you would get these two ratings, and you would, I would sit in talent reviews. And if a person was great on the business but wasn't good with building the organization, they would not get promoted. Very simple. And I think that's a strategy that every company needs to really put the money to,
Yeah.
walk the talk on, kind of really making sure that they prioritize how good they are in managing people. It could be peers at an early level, okay,
Okay.
and later on it's the direct reports. So I think that's kind of one of the strategies to dealing with it.
Yeah, no, that's very well said. And so what are in kind of your experiences, what are some traits that make a good leader or an excellent leader?
So, of course, I mean, the essence of everything is take care of your people, and the business takes care of itself, right? You
Yeah.
need to understand that a leader is very different to a manager. And I'm surprised by how many big companies do not understand that it's a totally different skill set. So a great manager, I always say an employee is great with his hands, right? With the technical stuff. A manager is great with his hands and his head. He brings in the strategic thinking, but a leader needs to be great with his hands and his head, of course, but added the dimension of leading from the heart, right? And
Yeah.
that's kind of the core differentiator between a manager and a leader. As Simon Sinek said, a leader doesn't manage the business. He manages the people that manage the business. So that's kind of the key element. But in the book, I talk about, and, people ask me, why did you call it Dare to Lead Like a Girl, right?
Yeah.
And it's really a homage to, in 2014, I was one of the global marketing directors responsible for the Always Like a Girl, Run Like a Girl campaign. And I don't know if you remember there, but basically, you ask a young girl what it means to run like a girl, and she says, well, it means run as fast as you can, right? But something changes during socialization, and suddenly it becomes, almost an insult. And basically, I believe it's
Right.
time to claim that phrase once again, and this time in the world of leadership. Because, we keep on saying, oh, these are the soft skills of a leader, without understanding that these soft skills, emotional intelligence, and I'll talk about all the elements in a minute, those are actually the strengths skills that are needed in the 21st century. And it's backed with research. So one of the key the key research that I use in my book is a research done in Harvard Business Review. And it's really interesting. So they did the research back in 2012 to try and understand why there's not more women in senior role, or women not as effective as leaders, right? And they did the research, and they, basically in that research back in 2019, they found that, yeah, women were as effective as men in leadership roles. Now, the interesting thing is that they repeated the same research in 2019. And this time, they found that women weren't only as good as men, but they actually scored higher than men in 17 out of the 19 leadership traits. Now, these include things that you would spontaneously say that women as nurturers are better at. Things like, managing people, motivating people, intuition, teamwork, all of those kind of elements there, right? But in this research, there was also elements like, brave decision making or innovation, because, women do tend to be better with empathy, and you can't innovate when you don't have empathy, right? You can't understand consumers' needs. So this research basically kind of shows that, yes, instead of trying to fix women in the workplace, maybe it's time we start learning from them. And that's kind of the key premise. Now, I called it Dare to Lead Like a Girl. It's really a provocation. I don't think that and I know there's no such thing as a masculine brain or a feminine brain. There are traits, feminine leadership traits, that through socialization have been associated as more feminine or masculine.
Okay.
But we all, have the ability to float between the two. So basically, the premise is that, it's a provocation to all leaders, women as well as men, to connect to those more feminine leadership traits. Things like passion. Passion is a huge superpower. Okay?
Oh, absolutely.
Right? Passion, and I call my model, the Dare to Lead Like a Girl model, I call it the 5P. Okay, coming from marketing, it's easy to remember.
Okay.
So the first one is passion. Okay, and passion leads us to focus on our purpose. So within that, right?
Mm-hmm.
The second is the perseverance. And anyone who gave birth, talk with me about the resilience and perseverance. So there is an element of perseverance is about asking for direction and not giving up. And that's also something that women tend to be slightly better at. Okay, so don't feel that you need to know it all. It's okay to ask, right? So to continue with the grit. So that's the second one. The third one is, I call it physical power. Okay, and it's all about, and this is something that actually women sometimes are not as good as, okay, but it's the element of taking care of our energy, right? It's everything that has to do with self-care. Because sometimes we are good at helping others manage their energy, okay? But we forget to manage our own. So that third P is managing others, your team energy, but also yourself, making sure you eat properly, sleep properly, digitally detox, right? Boston Group Consulting did research where they forced their employees to take an afternoon of digital detox a week, and they found productivity went up 74%. So there's a lot of elements, yeah, right? And we're constantly on. You were talking
yeah. And then when you leave, you're, on this. So it's
that I go crazy with that. I have a phenomena here that, I see parents rushing to leave work early to pick up their kids, and then they're sitting in the park and they're constantly on the phone. I'm like, what are you doing? Just make sure that when you're there, you're there. So
Yeah.
that's the third P. The fourth P is actually the most important. Okay, so Harvard, did research together, where basically the 75-year-long research to understand what is the number one driver of happiness. Do you want to take a guess? It starts with a P. But number one driver of happiness. Okay, I won't put you on the quiz test.
Well,
But
I was
number
going to say purpose, but you already kind of covered that. So it's not purpose. Play.
play is important. It's really important. And my second company is called Happiness, which is a game on happiness.
Okay.
So that's important. I actually need to add that as the sixth P. But the number one driver is actually people. You said it earlier, right?
Okay.
You want to work with people. And, it's about, the power with people and not the power over people. The quality of our life is the quality of our relationship. And that's also true for the workplace. So they repeated this research and they asked, what's the number one driver of your happiness at work? And the first thing that came up is, do I have a best friend at work? And CEOs were like, what is this stupid question? But it kept popping up as the number one driver. So really people.
I could see that. Yeah, absolutely. Because when you you want to have friends. You want to, if you don't enjoy the people you work with, it's going to be very difficult to be happy going there. You're going to be miserable. You're like, I hate this place.
And it's also, and that's the issue. You talked about entrepreneurs. That's the issue for some of us that are working, our own business or a small business. I mean, I can tell you what drove me as my soul sisters and brothers that I had in the workplace. But in order to get there, it's really important as a leader that you get to know your people as people. I mean, you ask me what makes a good leader. When I think about Jim, my first boss, right? I was there in his house. He helped my husband find a job. He really cared for me way beyond, what was my numbers. And you felt like, you're cared for. So that's kind of a critical dimension of a good leader.
Absolutely.
And I'll tell you, the fifth one is interesting. The fifth one I only got to recently. So the fifth P, right? The 5P model.
Yeah.
And it happened by chance. So when I left the company, right, and I decided to go study, I actually gave a talk in this huge women conference. It was the first time that I gave this talk that later evolved into a TED talk. And in there was a professor. His name is Professor Tal Ben Shahar, and he's Harvard's guru for positive psychology. And he was actually the one, I met him the evening before. He said, oh, you're speaking tomorrow, what time? And he was so cute, and he came and listened. And at the end of the talk, I mean, I was all out there. The emotions were raw. I got to stand in ovation. He came to me, he's like, Dalia? Yeah, he was amazing. He's like, you need to talk on TED and you need to write a book. Okay, so he was my first inspiration, and he became my mentor for this second career. But then I started studying with him the science of positive psychology. And suddenly I realized that everything intuitively that I believed about leadership, everything I told you until now, was actually grounded in science, the science of happiness, the science of positive psychology. So I started studying that, and then I started teaching it. I teach at the Singapore Management University, and today I work with the likes of Google and Microsoft on bringing happiness at work, leadership development program. So my 5P is, I called it positivity. Okay. Because positivity is contagious, and apparently all dimensions of productivity increase when we're in a positive state.
I believe that 100%.
Right? It's kind of, you say it makes sense, but it's really critical. Our brain is 30% more productive when we're positive. There's less absenteeism, there's better health, there's better teamwork. So it's not that happiness leads to success. Sorry, it's not success that leads to happiness. It actually is happiness that leads to success, because happier people, are healthier, have better relationship, and they're more productive. So that's kind of my fifth P. which is
Okay.
all around what does it mean to lead with positivity. And it's not about being, I'll tell you now, it's not about being happy all the time. That's kind of, Martin Seligman, who's the father of positive psychology, he was asked what he regrets. And he said, I'm sorry I called it positive psychology because it's not all about happy. That's sometimes perceived as, toxic positivity or I'm always happy. No, it's about being what I call emotionally brave. It's about emotionally brave is about, accepting all emotions,
Yeah.
accept all range of emotions. It's okay not to be okay. And then as a manager, if you're seeing someone, sad or depressed, they need to be comfortable to share that with you. Okay, you need to be comfortable with empathy to listen to them. Sometimes where, I'll tell you an anecdote. There was research on empathy, and they did brain scans, and they found that women sit with empathy longer. They sit, they listen, they sit with empathy. Men sit with empathy, but for a shorter time, much shorter time, and then an area in their brain that is associated with problem solving lights up. And anyone who has I don't know about you, but my husband is like empathetic for 5 minutes, and then he's like fixing it for me, right? When I'm
Yeah.
all I want is just, shut up and listen.
Yes.
So that's also about kind of being a good leader, is just being there with empathy before you try and fix things. My professor Tal Ben Shachar nicely says that, who doesn't have negative emotions? Only psychopath or dead people. So if you're sad, it's great news.
Well, it's true. And that's the thing too. I think it's like we've become so embraced in this kind of positive self-help type culture, law of attraction, meditation, all this stuff. But nobody talks about the fact that like, no matter how great you are at, starting to master those skills, you're still going to get sad. You're still going to feel anxious. You're still going to feel depressed because those are just normal emotions. It's just, you need the tools to deal with them. Like if you're never sad, like, yeah, you're dead or you're a psychopath. Like there's something going on. Like I was very anxious, this morning, and I'm like, okay, what is going on that's causing this anxiety? Is it hormonal? Am I not doing something I should be doing? Am I procrastinating? So it's like all these tools I've learned, I've been able to kind of pinpoint it. And what it came down to was it's actually positive anxiety, which I think exists. Meaning, I have a big announcement coming out on the next podcast, and it's something I've always wanted to do, and it's like a dream come true, and it's actually happening, and it's going to put me on a different platform. I'm going to increase the exposure that I thought I've had, but I haven't had. And I think it's just the natural nervousness of that, which I'm sure you felt with your book.
Yeah. With my book, I'm having, it started with the TED Talk. So in 2019, I gave a TED Talk, Dare to Lead Like a Girl. And there's a picture of me actually behind the stage. I'm meditating before I went on stage because I was, my heart was pumping, and I was feeding myself my own medicine. And I kept on saying to myself, you're not scared, you're excited, you're, in a positive way, right?
Yeah.
And I just kept on kind of, saying that, and this is also something that I do a lot when I do the workshops with companies. What, people think about, okay, the palms getting sweaty and their heart rate, but stress is actually really good for us. It increases focus. And that's what happened to me on TED. I went on and I was so in the zone. Literally, I didn't even remember what I said. I was just so in the zone, so focused, so kind of, everyone said, whoa, you were so calm and cool and collected. And, afterwards, when I kind of dove deeper into it, this is what stress does in our body. So the heart rates, it's actually pumping energy and dopamine and stress hormones that are good for us. They increase focus and they increase, memory, etc. The issue is not stress. Okay. The issue is, so in low or medium level, stress is good for us. The issue is when it's prolonged. Okay. The issue is lack of recovery.
Yeah.
So think about a exam, going into an exam, right? If you manage it well, it's actually a great focus area. The issue is if you constantly are not sleeping and moving from one stressful event to the other, that's when you get worn out. And so for me now, I also, like you, I'm kind of, okay, let's understand these emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Let's pinpoint them, as you say. I call them name, tame, okay, claim and reframe, right? So you try to understand what they are. That's the basic of all of it. Why? And I'll, from a neuroscience, I'm a little bit of a neuroscience nerd, but from a neuroscience perspective, our amygdala, which is where our emotions are stored, and our frontal cortex, which is where the decisions are made, act like a seesaw. Okay, so when our amygdala is aroused, right? And we are emotionally aroused, our frontal cortex is not working, right? We can't think straight. And when we name an emotion, we use language, we're actually forcing the frontal cortex to work. And by doing that, it kind of calms down. Think about it when a child is like, oh, I understand you're frustrated. Suddenly he has a word for it, right? Or I'm saying to myself, what am I feeling? Oh, I'm actually excited. So when we're naming it, right, that's kind of the first way of dealing with those emotions. The next one is taming it. Taming it is, and I'm sharing with you a little bit of kind of the methodology that I use in the book and I used on myself. But taming it is, sometimes I use the analogy of, let's go behind the waterfall, because when we're very emotional, we're in the waterfall, right?
Yeah.
Emotions pulling us back. We're in the anger, right? We're angry. We have anger. Stepping back, going behind the waterfall, is we're still seeing it, but instead of I am angry, I have anger. Interesting. I have anger. I
Yeah.
have anxiety, right? It's kind of, I sometimes say, step out of the drama so you can understand the movie.
Yeah.
Right?
Totally.
So that's kind of, that's been a huge help for me when I'm in a really uptight, to just say to myself, okay, what is it? The naming, then the taming, okay? Then the explaining what's going on here. Why is it happening? And then the reframing. So like you reframed it, I'm actually excited about it, or,
Yeah.
let's see let's see how it looks like from the other person's point of view, because, you know, more often than not, we're emotional about something that our perception is completely not the reality. We think we're emotional about an event, but we're not. We're emotional about our interpretation of that event. And in many
Very
cases,
well
that
said.
interpretation can be wrong,
Yeah.
right? Someone screams at us and we think it's about us, and there was a whole load of things going on that had nothing to do. So that's kind of the reframe element. And then the last
Don't
step,
personalize it.
yeah, exactly. Don't personalize it. Don't take it to heart. Try and kind of understand it, what's going on. And the last step is actually, act on it, because act versus react. So this whole process, make sure that you don't react. You don't, if someone screams at you, you don't scream back. You just kind of do the name tame, explain and refrain, but
Yeah.
then you act on it. Okay. And I always say, don't suppress emotions, because they will pop out at some stage. Either you will kind of be passive aggressive, or it's proven that when we suppress, they come out. So don't suppress, express, but find the appropriate way of expressing. And I know it's easier said than done, but that is a methodology that that's kind of daring to lead like a girl,
Yeah.
where we don't hide the emotion. I mean, it's a fact actually that men talk about emotions less, but they actually have a higher rate of heart attack and suicidal attempts. Why? Because they don't talk about it. So
Yes.
it is important to talk about our emotions, right? The only thing I say is don't be reactive. Try and kind of be, act on them, because we know that people don't listen to your message. That's only 7% of what they perceive. 93% is the how you deliver the message. So if you're so emotional, right, the other person doesn't hear a word you're saying.
No, that makes complete sense. Yeah, it's almost like that reactive versus responsive. And I
Yes.
always say, like, take it if something's gonna make you react to where you're gonna be like, fuck you. Like, try to take a deep breath. And then if you still want to say fuck you, say fuck you. But if you probably might not have that knee-jerk reaction, you might be like, well, that wasn't very nice. I'm sorry you're having a bad day, versus the fuck you. Because sometimes you need to say it because it just is what needs to happen.
Yeah, or you just walk out and I'm like, you triggered me. I'll come back, when I'm ready to talk. That's okay. So you kind of detach yourself from it.
Yeah.
Right. But I'm not saying go and accept the negative, right? I'm just saying response versus react. Take the time on that. And yeah, it is easier said than done, but we can practice it. I mean, the grandma that used to say, count to 10, right? Is so true. I mean, that's they used to say of Henry Ford that he had a habit of writing an angry note. So whenever he was angry, he would write that person a note and he would put it in the drawer, and his rule was 7 days. It would be in the drawer for 7 days. And if after 7 days he took it out and he still wanted to send it, then he would. Just like your comment. So getting it out there is important, and writing it down, but then getting it out there in a way that the other person does something about it and it doesn't become a tit for tat.
Yeah, it's like that emotion. Like sometimes emotions get worse at night, like before we go to bed, right? And we'll kind of dwell on a problem, but the old saying is sleep on it. And it's amazing how that problem that seems so big at night, all of a sudden you're like, I can deal with it. Like, I'm okay with that. So what would your advice be if somebody listening to this is in a working environment where they have bullies around them? What's your best advice for them to kind of try to deal with it before they quit?
So I always say, I mean, people ask me, what if it happened to your daughter, right? And I always say, I wouldn't quit immediately. Okay. I think if I left immediately, I would have felt, I didn't deal with it, because, sometimes it takes a while to understand if it's really bullying. I mean, I think it's important to clarify. I mean, the definition of bullying is there's a power distance, okay? There's a malintent, and it's prolonged. So, one case doesn't make it bullying. Bullying is kind of a while, but I'm not saying stick it out and don't stay there 3 years. I would say, you stay 6 months, and you try and kind of take in whatever you think makes sense, okay? And you roll over, what you don't agree with, for example, right? But in that time, kind of your starting position is always listen, right? And listen is silence. What is going on here? Do I have something to learn on myself? Is there an opportunity element there, right?
Yeah.
And then, as you're seeing, if you're seeing it being prolonged, that's when it's kind of, you start with a 0 tolerance. Okay, that would be my number one. That's kind of from the very beginning. Sorry, I don't accept being spoken to like this. I don't find this respectful. Let's have a respectful conversation. Whatever you want to say, I mean, make it clear and to the point, right? And immediate. So that's kind of, and then if a few times, I would recommend, either you ask to stay within the company, but the key is really to report it. And, a bully will not change their ways. You can't change someone that doesn't want to change unless you use leverage. And leverage is what's important to that person. And in most cases, it's their career. So until today, I still, I try to fix it all myself because I was a C-suite woman, right? I can deal with it.
Right?
No. Most cases you can. So you either need to go to someone, parallel to your manager, okay, or ideally to your manager's manager. and this is the reality, this is what's happening, right? And get people involved in there. I got another strategy that I heard about from Adam Grant, actually, which I thought was brilliant. This one lady was about to start a job with someone that had this reputation, and she decided to take it heads on. And she basically, in the first meeting, I always do an expectation alignment meeting, so in that meeting she actually said to the person, she said, listen, this is what I'm hearing, coming into this role. I met you, I don't think this is true, and I'm happy to partner with you to change that equity.
Yeah.
If you would be interested in that. And then she made him kind of a partner of kind of changing that reality. So I think that's the second thing, so zero tolerance, build your own resilience. So start with, listening.
Yeah.
Zero tolerance. Okay. So if it doesn't feel comfortable, it's not comfortable. So get it, step and say it's not comfortable.
One thing about that I think, and I want to address this because it's happened to me in the past. This all sounds amazing, right? Zero tolerance. Say to that person, please don't speak to me that way. Like, let's try to handle this in a better way. But I think a lot of people are fearful that bullies usually are the loudest, and they seem to have power that they shouldn't, right? So they're afraid to speak to this person because they're like, oh, well, they're such a bully and they're such a freaking dodo, like asshole.
Yeah.
They'll just run to HR and get you fired. So I think a lot of people are afraid to stick up for that bully, because that bully will then be like, fuck you, I'm going to get you eliminated. So that, I think that's a real fear too. I know that that's happened to me before.
Yeah.
I didn't say anything because of that.
The fear is there, but I always want you to kind of ask yourself, if you want to stay in that company, right? Because if you're fired from a toxic environment, then you're better off somewhere.
Guys.
Sorry?
Said blessing in disguise.
Exactly, right? And I know sometimes, and that's why I stayed also for a while. It was a matter of I was the main breadwinner, and there were a lot of other things going on. And my husband was opening his company, and I wanted to support him. So I would say, make an HR ally aware of the situation probably before, okay? But do address it heads on, because I think that's the reality of kind of, I'm not going to tolerate, and this is the consequences if this continues. And then when they run to HR are aware of that situation. And I think there's a whole load of this is very that's why it's so prevalent, right? Because people don't speak up, and especially in big cultures, right? There's a whole fear factor going on there, and that's where HR needs to really be listening between the lines to what is not being said. Because I thought I was brave, I shared feedback directly, I shared feedback with HR, but at some stage what I didn't do is put a ethics line complaint in play. Because at some stage when all people are, and yes, they were doing things, but behind the scenes, that I wasn't aware, and it was too slow, and etc. But putting an ethics line complaint, and most big companies have them, kind of forces the company to deal with the challenge. So that's why I say dare to lead like a girl. Courage is one word, and I want to share two thoughts about courage that are very important. The first one, that people kind of misperceive courage to mean making decisions that others didn't, or stepping ahead of the troops. But courage actually comes from the French word cœur, which means heart.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
The real courageous leaders lead from the hearts.
Yeah.
And the second thing I wanted to say about courage is that it's not the absence of fear. We all have fear. We all. Someone that tell you that they don't have fear is lying.
Yeah.
We all have fear, right? So courage is having that fear, going back to your superpowers, and then stepping up. And that's the third strategy that I would give people. When you're operating from your superpower, okay, don't let that fear stop you from operating from your superpowers. So in my case, right, I was so busy defending myself that I forgot what I was good at. And I didn't, that's why in the end of second year, I'm like, whoa, even in my strengths, which is people and creativity, I'm not bringing my full self to work. And that's when I made the conscious decision that I'm going to put aside fear and I'm going to go back to my superpowers. And whether, that's what my boss is looking for or not, I don't really care, because I know that's what's right for the business.
Yeah.
So when we're operating, I think that's a really important point, to assess whether you're happy at work and whether you're in the right place. The people is the first, but you said the purpose is the second. And the purpose is, what you're good at, what you're passionate about, what the world needs. So if you don't feel that you're able to bring your strengths to work every single day, you're probably not in the right place.
Yeah. Oh, exactly.
Yeah? So that's kind of those 3 dimensions that I would advise.
I always tell my friends that are like working at a company, like always, like every month or 2 months, like update your resume, like always have it ready to go.
Yeah,
because it'll give you more power and more courage, right? If you know that, like, I can leave at any moment, and it'll just help your confidence, and that you always keep up your relationships with your headhunters. And I just think that you always need to have a game plan, especially because when you're working for a company, unfortunately, there's so much that's out of your control.
And I don't want it to, it's interesting. When I was teaching at the university, I had one student who told me, Prof, thank you. I now know what my purpose is, because I did a whole find your purpose. I know what my purpose is, but I know I need to be a corporate slave for a few years, and then I'll do what I love. And if you ask me the trigger for writing the book, the first one was a tissue box story. The second one was that student, because no, it doesn't have to be that way. I spent 17 years in corporate America, the most corporate America that it gets, and I loved it. I thrived every moment, because there was the right kind of, focus on these 5 elements. I was aligned with my purpose, doing campaigns that, were, changing habits, like always like a girl, or changing, experiences, etc. So, the corporate world, don't think that being an entrepreneur is any easier. The same challenges are there, okay?
Oh, yeah, just in a much different level.
In a different way. And sometimes, office politics is not in the office, but it's with clients. Or so the other thing that I sometimes say is politics is always something that I say, oh, I don't do politics. I work hard. I hate politics. And that's something, another learning that I had, that politics doesn't have to mean you lose your integrity. Politics is just being strategic about how you achieve your results. And strategic is like, I would go into a meeting with this big sell, and I would prepare and I would sell it, not knowing that the decision has been made on the golf course. So there's something about, getting the alliances going. We sometimes don't realize this importance of the pre-alliances, right? It's kind of getting stakeholders. So when you go in to do your sell, you have all your support. That's kind of politics, is being smart about reading the room, okay, but operating from your own integrity. So that's something I'm calling now politically savvy, okay? Yeah, we shouldn't be naive, okay? Politics is how corporates run, and we need to find the right way of, playing the game, meaning getting the alliances, the pre-work, but doing it in a way that is in line with our values.
Very, very well said. Well, I know we're running out of time, so I want to make sure that people, so where can they find you? Where can they sign up for your coaching? Where can they buy the book? All that good stuff.
So thanks for that. So today, my main work is working with company on a, leadership development program. It's a 10-module program that literally takes you through from finding your purpose to dealing with failure. So, on my website, daliafeldheim.com, you just make an appointment, both for the coaching, the speaking, and then the book. I'm so excited. It came out last Friday.
Yay.
And everywhere, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, and we're actually up to number 50 in, women in leadership. So yeah, go ahead and let's, I have a huge sense of mission because I feel like we are struggling and we can change it. The whole premise of the book is that we can teach ourselves to be happier and more resilient because pain will happen in our life. Okay,
Yeah.
but it's our decision to choose joy. And in the book, I give all the tools of what does it mean to choose joy in the workplace.
Yes, exactly. Because you know what, you guys, life is too short to be miserable or unhappy or fantasizing about somebody else's life and
Yeah.
wishing you had their life. You don't. You need to make the best out of your life and focus on your life. And I always say one of my little tricks, it sounds a little weird at first, but one of my little tricks was always put your mortality at the front of your mind because it's going to happen. You're going to die. Okay. That's the truth. But if you were more aware of your mortality, I think that any moment this could all end, half of the bullshit we worry about and get upset about would really start to take a back seat.
Yeah.
So I always say, put your death at the front of your mind.
It's a great tip. And I say to people, will it matter in a year? Ask yourself this question.
Yes.
Will this matter in a year? And, you kind of, one of my life mottos is have an idea of where you're heading because it's good to have goals, but that's not, it's not attaining your goals that will make you happy. It's actually the journey towards them. So have an idea of where you're heading, but don't forget to enjoy the view on the way. So
that is so true. And that just rings so true for me, like being when I was doing comedy all the time and wanting to go on the road and be famous and be known and be financially free, so to say. And now I look back that I'm kind of pivoted and gone into a different area of entertainment that I love even more. I look back and I think like, why was I sad? Why was I anxious? Why was I so like just not myself, unhappy? When I look back at those memories now and I think even though I was unhappy, those were some of the greatest times ever. And they bring a smile to my face and it just kind of like jolted me awake going, don't be upset because you're not exactly where you need to think you should be now. Like enjoy this process because one day you're going to look back and be like, why was I so unhappy? Those were actually really great times. So yeah, join the journey.
Moment. Take, I have a big gratitude sticker. Every time I brush my teeth, I'm like, what am I grateful for today?
I like that.
It's all part of our journey. So enjoy the view on the way.
Yes. Well, I'm grateful that you did this podcast. So thank you very much. And I'm grateful for everybody listening to this podcast that continues to listen to this podcast. This is episode 169. We are still going strong. We still have so much
with your announcement. So good luck with that. That's really exciting.
And that is coming on the next episode. So please stay tune in for that at least, and continue following us on our journey. So this is amazing. So Dalia, thank you so much. You guys go check her out. Go buy the book. If you have a company, hire her to come in and teach about leadership. If you're an employee of a company, you can suggest her to HR. There's so many things you can do. The moral of the story is enjoy your journey, have gratitude, be happy, because once you're happy, it's going to be a lot easier to get wealthy.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much. And we'll see you guys next time to find out who's next.
Hey, your host here, Madison Malloy. Please make sure to subscribe to the show on all podcast platforms and please rate and review us on iTunes and Spotify. Also, if you have any questions or comments, you can email us at contact@nexttomadison.com. I thank you again for listening. Bye.